and welcome to the Wormhole podcast with me, Charlie Place, a spin-off of my events in Southampton. Joining me today is Nicola Cornick, author of the time-slip novels House of Shadows, The Phantom Tree, and The Woman in the Lake. Nicola is also the current chair of the Romantic Novelist Association and works for Ashdown House in Oxfordshire. Hello, Nicola, and thank you for joining me today.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm going to start with before your time-slip novels, if that's all right. You started out and were for quite a while an author of Regency romance, and your time-slip novels are a lot more recent.
Yes. So yes, actually, I'm what's known as a veteran author now because I've been writing for over 20 years.
Oh, right.
And so yes, it really does make you feel old. And for about 15 of those, I think I was writing Regency romance, Regency historicals, which was kind of how I started my writing career. And during a lot of that time, I had a real yen to write a time-slip book inspired by the work that I was doing at Ashdown House, but it never felt like the right time. And then eventually, fortunately, it was. So I was able to put all the work that I'd done at Ashdown into House of Shadows and start writing different sorts of books. So that's my sort of that's my CV.
So on the House of Shadows, bringing into it, you've got the three sets of characters in three periods of time. The 17th century Elizabeth Stuart and William Craven, 19th century Lavinia, and then modern day Holly. Her story is that her brother has gone missing whilst doing family research, and it seems to relate to all of the others. So you've got these characters that combine fact and fiction, and I was wondering what your research and creation process was like.
Well, I have to be completely honest because House of Shadows was my first time slip. I'm not sure that I had a process. I'm not the most organised of writers. I have to admit, I'm not the most organised of writers at the best of times. I'm not a plotter. I am a pantser. I am a total pantser, and it gets me into so much trouble when I don't have a plan. Because I just do tend to start writing with an idea and then try and get everything else to fall into line afterwards. And with House of Shadows, it was a particular problem because, as you've mentioned, not only were there the three timelines. I mean, as I've discovered, it's difficult enough to get two timelines to fit together and to work out, especially when you've got a mystery in there that you're trying to build up and to solve. So really, I just started off flying into the mist, as it were. Sort of, I was inspired, I suppose, that the idea of the story very much came from the 17th century thread, because that was where all my work at Ashdown and my research was based. So it was the story of the Winter Queen and William Craven that inspired the whole book. So that was my starting point. And I think I suppose what I really wanted to do now, looking back, I suppose I wanted to write a book about as much of the history of Ashdown and the Craven family as I could, hence putting in two historical timelines. But of course, in order to write a time slip, it needed to have a contemporary thread as well. So with that particular book, the contemporary one was the bit I struggled with the most, because obviously I wasn't a contemporary author. I'd never written contemporary fiction before. And it's interesting that in the book since then and in the time since then, I think that has turned around quite a lot. So in the book I'm writing now and the one that's coming out next year, there's a lot more of the contemporary thread. I'm more comfortable with that now. But certainly my process for the first maybe the first two books and a little bit with The Woman in the Lake, was to start with the historical story and then to build to create a modern mystery around that, so that I had a historical story. I suppose the mystery was actually in the history. The mystery is in the past and it's solved in the present. So the contemporary story is the biggest fictional creation.
That's fascinating. I never would have guessed that you don't plan.
Really?
No, I'm flabbergasted. No, it does not show at all.
Oh, thank goodness. Well, I mean, House of Shadows took so long to write. I was supposed to write it in a year, and it took me 18 months because it was so complex, and really because I was finding my way as I went along. But I can't even pretend that I'm any better now. Today, for example, I was writing today, and I've completely written myself into the sand because I haven't got a plan, and I actually had to sit down and think, okay, I must stop now and plan how these two stories interweave, the historical and the contemporary, because I hadn't done it. So yeah, unfortunately, that's just my process. And it can be very frustrating, but I think, as with so many things in writing, you have to find your own way of doing things, and you have to follow your instinct. So that with Timeslip, I would say it obviously does need more. It does need more structure and more of a plan than I was writing when I was doing Regency historicals. But even so, it's not possible to make an author like myself be that disciplined all the time, as long as I get there in the end.
Yeah. So you used Ashdown House where you work in this book. It's the main location. In reality, it has a tenant, but visitors can come and view the entrance hall, staircase, and roof, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in the book, you burn it down, which I know isn't a spoiler. It's on the back of the book. But what was this like, and what was the reaction of your co-workers?
Yes, well, when I started, I had absolutely no idea that was what was going to happen in the story, and I was very surprised as well. But within the context of the story, it felt like the right thing to do. And I was also very influenced by what had happened at Coleshill House, which was a house of a similar age, only a few miles up the road, in fact. And that was what had happened to Coleshill. It caught fire and it burned down. And the bit in the book where the cupola on the roof crashes through 3 floors actually happened at Coleshill. And the more that I wrote this story, the more that felt as though it fitted with what was happening in the book. So I kind of meshed together the histories of Coleshill and Ashdown. And yes, well, it didn't go down well with my colleagues at Ashdown, I have to say. They were either, both shocked and quite upset in some cases, and also confused. So that's why I always have to say now that whenever I write or say anything about the book, the house is still standing. But Coleshill was the inspiration for that particular thread of the story.
Do we have a reading of House of Shadows?
Yes, I have got a short extract from that, and this is from a scene where Elizabeth, the Winter Queen, is spying on a meeting of the Knights of the Rosy Cross. So this is actually not set in Ashdown, but set at Elizabeth's palace in The Hague. So this is part from the 17th century bit of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Someone caught her from behind, his hand over her mouth, one arm about her waist, pulling her out of the room, swinging the door shut behind them. It was sudden and shocking. No one touched the Queen, least of all manhandled her. Instinct took over, instinct she didn't know she possessed. She bit down hard, tasting the tang of leather against her tongue, and he released her at once, though the bite could not have hurt, and nor could her feeble attempts to lash out with boots or elbows. You fool! She spun around to face him. She was shaken, ruffled more than she ought to have been. Don't you know who I am? She saw his eyes widen, hazel eyes which held more than a hint of laughter. In the flaring torchlight, she could see he was of no more than average height, which still made him several inches taller than she. He looked strong, though, and durable. His hair was a rich chestnut, curling over the white lace of his collar, his nose straight, a cleft in his chin. And even in this moment of stupefaction, even as he recognised her, there was still amusement in his face rather than the deference he should be showing her. Your Majesty, he bowed. She waited haughtily. His lips twitched. Forgive me, he said smoothly after a moment. Nothing more, and it did not sound like a request, still less like an apology. He was young, this man, a good deal younger than she was, possibly no more than 2 or 3 and 20. Elizabeth thought she recognised him, though she did not know his name. She could see he was a soldier, not a courtier. Unlike the Knights of the Rosy Cross, he was clad plainly in shirts, breeches, cloak and boots. There was a sword at his side and a knife in his belt. Heat and sudden tiredness hit her again, making her sway. Perhaps her ladies had been right, damn them. She was 6 months pregnant and she should have been resting. The expression in his eyes changed from amusement to concern. He took her hand, drawing her forwards. "Come into the guard-room." "No," she hung back. "I don't want anyone to see me. There is no one here but me." She allowed him to usher her through the door into the small chamber. It was Spartan, with a bare floor and 1 candle on a battered table. A meagre fire glowed in the grate. It was no place for a queen, but there was a chair, hard and wooden, and Elizabeth sank down onto it gratefully. "You're guarding the ceremony alone?" she asked. "I am." He looked rueful. "Badly, it would seem." She smiled at that. "You could not have anticipated this." "That the Queen herself would choose to come and watch?" He shrugged, half turning aside to pour her a cup of water from the carafe on the table. "I suppose not." "I'm a member of the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross," Elizabeth said. "I have every right to be here." His hand stilled. He turned back, dark brows raised. Then why not exercise that right openly? Why creep in like a thief? Few things surprised Elizabeth these days. Few people challenged her. It was one of the privileges of royal blood, to be unquestioned. Never explain, never complain was an adage that her mother, fair, frivolous Anne of Denmark, had taught her. This man evidently thought that a commoner might question a queen. All the same, she chose to ignore his question, tasting the water he passed her instead, which was warm and brackish, but not altogether unpleasant. "I don't believe I know you," she said. He bowed again. "William Craven, entirely at your service."
That sort of brings me to the next question, where you've got the Rosy Cross.
Yes.
You use everyday objects in your novels as crucial items. They are like the main fantasy elements. They tend to be malign. And I found they're almost characters in their own right. Where is this interest in objects from?
That's very interesting. Nobody's ever kind of asked me about that before, but you are absolutely right. When I was studying, I went back to college as a mature student to study a master's degree in public history, which is all about the sort of the interface of popular and academic history and how to make history more accessible and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we studied as part of that, one of the bits of my course that I found particularly fascinating was all about material objects and how they can tell stories and sort of the memories and superstitions and stories that people attach to them. So I think that has been really influential on me, and it does, yeah. I mean, it does come out in each of the books. There's always some element like that has this power. I suppose, yes, that the malign power thing in House of Shadows particularly, that arose from the stories associated with the portrait collection actually at Ashdown, because all the I'm trying not to give too many spoilers here. All the story, the thread in the book about the pearl and the power of the pearl necklace is actually all based on research that I had done and stories that were told about a particular necklace that features in the portraits in the house. So that was what inspired me there. And again, it was a cursed pearl. It did have a malign influence, or so it was believed. So yes, but that's a particularly interesting question. I do have a real interest, a real fascination for material objects and the stories they can tell.
Yeah. Moving on to the Phantom Tree. It's your second time slip, and you came up with a solution for a Tudor mystery that's never been solved. What happened to Mary Seymour after infancy? I should probably say here, Mary is the child of Catherine Parr and her third husband, Thomas Seymour. So I was thinking, what got you thinking about her? Because she's fairly an obscure person.
Yes, a very obscure historical person, and actually that is something that I particularly enjoy exploring. I mean, there were a couple of things came together with that book. Firstly, I'd been fascinated to know what happened to Mary Seymour ever since I'd read. I think it was a historical novel by Jean Plaidy when I was a child, and Mary was mentioned. And I thought, and then, you know, I kind of thought at the time, and as I grew older, I don't remember ever hearing what happened to her. And then I tried to find out, and then there didn't seem to be anything about her. And then I stumbled across this mystery of what became of her. And it fascinated me that such a child of such high status in terms of birth could just completely vanish like that there was no record of what happened to her after the age of 2. And that's kind of like a gift for a writer, really, isn't it? You fill that space then with your own imaginings. So that was kind of why I chose Mary. But I think in a broader sense, again, I am fascinated by this idea of lesser known characters in history, because I mean, even Elizabeth of Bohemia, of course, is a very different character, but she's not a well-known character, and so that inspired me, because there's not that much about Elizabeth, and what there is very traditional and sort of the hackneyed old fairy tale princess kind of idea, and so I wanted to put her in a different light. And the same thing with Mary, and in fact the same thing with the character of Diana Beauclerk, who inspired the historical thread in The Woman in the Lake in my third book. All women in history whose stories had either not been told or had been told in a particular way. And yes, I mean, I love a historical mystery as well, to be honest. I mean, the next book I have coming out is all about the death of Amy Robsart and the love triangle with Robert Dudley and Queen Elizabeth I. So I love
brilliant.
I like tackling these big historical mysteries, and the one I'm writing at the moment is about the Princes in the Tower. So you can't get much bigger than that when it comes to historical mysteries. So there's all those elements, the idea of the lost characters from history, especially the women in history that you maybe want to give a different slant on their stories, and just that whole sort of detective element to it as well. So so that was why I chose Mary, because I just thought what an amazing opportunity for a writer to imagine what might have happened to that little girl, really.
So I've actually got a question about the Forgotten Sister, but I'm going to ask it later.
Right.
So trying to keep in chronological order, I suppose.
Yes.
So The Woman in the Lake, you've mentioned it already. It looks at the life of a semi-fictional, basically fictional lady of Lydiard Park, which is in Swindon. And she owns a gown that has the power to exacerbate personality traits. And this gown comes into the life of modern day Fenella, who's rebuilding her life following an abusive relationship. It's a bit different from the other two books. It's got multiple narrators telling the story. It's all executed really well. That's partly why I was surprised that you said you don't plan. You've got characters that are flawed in it.
Yes, definitely flawed characters, yeah.
You've got characters that are flawed. They're realistically flawed, but then you've got other characters who are objectively awful. I wondered if this was a difficult book to write.
Interesting. Yes, I mean, I think it is different in the sense. Well, firstly, it's darker. It was difficult to write some of those themes of abuse, but I felt it was important because so often, especially in sort of in society, I mean, it was inspired. Again, it was inspired, of course, by the true story of the second Lady Diana Spencer. She wasn't the first one of that name, and there was an abusive thread in her marriage and her relationship. So that was the inspiration for that sort of element of the story. And I felt it was important not to just just brush over that if I was writing about her and her life. But I found it difficult from that perspective. I absolutely loved exploring this idea of the power of possession, which essentially was about possessing the golden gown and how it messed with the minds of everybody who came into contact with it, basically. So I really enjoyed that. I mean, I like writing time slip. I like that, but I also like exploring other supernatural elements in my book. So yes, so that one was a bit different, and yes, I think quite a lot darker. A lot of people have said it was almost too dark for some readers, I think, and moving away from being as romantic as the other two as well. But I don't know, each book had just kind of, it wasn't actually, funnily enough, the book that was the hardest to write was The Phantom Tree, and this one wasn't particularly difficult, excuse me, except as I say, in the sense of some of the themes that I was exploring. I liked doing something a bit different, and yes, it was it was a very interesting book to write. I think, interestingly as well, the 18th century maybe isn't quite as popular as the 16th and 17th. Well, certainly not with my readership, but it was still a great sort of period to explore.
You use smuggling in the book, in The Woman in the Lake, and it was quite a bit involved with the estate of Lydiard Park in the book. And yes. I was wondering if it's something that really happened, because it's a really interesting aspect to read about.
Yes, it's smuggling in Swindon was all of that research was based on real history that I had explored, which I found amazing, because of course I had assumed, because Swindon is almost as far away from the sea as you can get, really, in any place in the country, that it wouldn't have any any kind of smuggling connections. But that just proved to me really how little I knew about smuggling, and how, of course, normally when you read about it, it's almost always based around the coast and that sort of thing. So yes, I researched that very thoroughly, because it seemed an extraordinary, almost unknown story, really. And yeah, I mean, the connection to Lydiard Park was imaginary, the bit that I put in there, but the connection between Swindon sort of as a centre for smuggling goods from the Dorset coast up towards the industrial towns of the Midlands and further north was absolutely the case. It was at a crucial sort of crossroads. It was a distribution centre, if you like, in the days. It's very similar, I suppose, to the way that modern smuggled goods are distributed, except that in those days there was a great deal more of it. It was absolutely fascinating to research. It was probably the most interesting bit of the history behind the book, certainly to my mind. So yeah, it was absolutely the case.
Do you think you might, as you said, it was very interesting, do you think you might go back to that sort of history for another book?
I don't know. I mean, this is the trouble. To be honest, as I go along, I accumulate so much interest in so many different topics that I end up keeping on researching afterwards. And I've got so many ideas for books that I want to write that are inspired by local history. I think the way that I actually keep the interest going and keep the research going is that I do talks based on the history of all of my books. So kind of the real history behind each of the books. And so when I do the talk about The Woman in the Lake, I always I explore the Swindon smuggling history in that. And there's certainly a great deal more to learn there, because at the moment all the smuggling tunnels under Swindon are mostly closed off, and you can't sort of go down there and see what it's really like, but they are there, so I can imagine there's some revelations to come there. So yes, I wouldn't rule it out in future as a potential topic. Of course, the other thing is I have to kind of go with to a certain extent with what my publisher would like me to write about. and we've all found that the Tudor period is much more popular with readers. So they're quite keen for Tudor set books, and I guess that's one of the reasons why the 18th century isn't as popular, because there just simply aren't as many of those sorts of books out there, I suppose, in comparison. But which is a shame in a way. But yes, I'm firmly back in the Tudor period for my next couple of books anyway.
Have we got a reading for The Woman in the Lake?
Yes. This is a scene where Isabella Gerard, who is the well, I was going to say heroine, but she's kind of a bit of an anti-heroine, really, of the historical thread of the story, has fled from London to her husband's country estate at Lydiard Park. Lydiard Park, summer 1763. The clock on the stables was striking 1/4 the hour as my carriage rattled into the coachyard at Lydiard Park. After so many miles, the sudden cessation of noise and movement was shocking. The silence was loud. The stillness made me feel sick. There was no light outside and no welcome. Not that I was expecting one. I had not sent ahead to warn the servants of our arrival. There had been no time. The carriage swayed as the coachman jumped down. I wondered if he were as stiff as I, tired, filthy and bad-tempered from travelling through the night. He had certainly driven like a man in a rage, sparing us nothing, which had made the journey all the more uncomfortable. Constance stirred in her seat, but she did not wake. Poor child, at the last change of horses she looked so pale and hollow-eyed from exhaustion that I thought she might faint with the effort of carrying a cup of broth for me, and I made her drink it herself. I pushed the window down. "Farrant, drive around to the front of the house. Do you expect me to walk?" I heard him swear. I had suffered the coachman and groom's snide disrespect all the way from London. How quickly the servants picked up on the mood of their master and acted accordingly. They all knew about Eustace's treatment of me, and so they thought that gave them licence to behave with insolence. But I was a duke's daughter. I knew how to deal with impertinent servants. "Ma'am," Tarrant's surly response was interrupted as a wavering light appeared. A lantern held in the hand of a very young ostler, who scuffed his way across the cobbles, yawning and rubbing his eyes. Behind him I saw the shadow of a cat slinking away. "What's to do?" His Wiltshire burr was so thick I could scarcely make out the words. "Who calls at this time of night?" "It is my Lady Gerard." The coachman was peremptory, using my authority to bolster his own now it suited him. "Look sharp, lad, and send someone to wake the house, and fetch more men to help with the horses." "There's no one here but me." The poor lad sounded panicked, as though he did not know what to do first. I took pity on him, leaning from the window. "Farrant, open this door. I can announce myself at the house." Turning, I shook Constance awake gently. Her shoulder felt brittle beneath my hand, and she turned her head against the velvet cushions of the seat, as though for comfort. "Come, Constance," I said, "you're home." She opened sleep-dazed dark eyes and looked at me, waking suddenly despite the care I had taken not to startle her. "Home? Lydiard? Oh, madam!" She scrambled up and thrust the door wide, jumping down before the groom had stirred to come and help us. I smiled wryly to think that one of us, at least, was pleased to be here. I had not been to Lydiard since the first year of my marriage. I had been happy enough then, although perhaps not as happy as I should have been as a new bride. Marriage had not at all been as I had imagined. "What on earth were you thinking, Bella?" my sister Betty had asked bluntly when my betrothal was announced. "Were you drunk? Everyone says you must have been to accept Eustace Gerard." It was true that Eustace had proposed to me at Vauxhall Spring Gardens, but I had been quite sober that night. It had been a whim, an impulse, I suppose. He had offered escape, or so I had thought, and I had been bored with my pattern-card life as a young lady at the Ton, and had grasped after something different. In those days, Eustace had made me laugh. He made no such efforts to amuse a wife.
She's not quite a heroine, but she's very compelling nevertheless.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad she is, because it's an interesting thing with that book. Somebody said to me that it doesn't have a heroine in the historical section of the book, because neither of the two female characters really feel like a heroine. I suppose they both behave badly in their different ways. But yes, I mean, I found both of those. I actually quite liked Constance. I found both of those characters fascinating to write, but I didn't like Isabella very much.
They kind of go back and forth, don't they? In the way that you've got these two stories, the same story from two different points of view, yes, which is brilliant. Yeah,
interesting to write it like that, because of course they quite thoroughly misunderstand each other on more than one occasion, and imagine that the other one's feeling things that they're not, and that was actually fun to write. Yes, it's interesting. I started off feeling much more sympathetic towards Isabella than I did by the time I got through to the end of the book, and I suppose perhaps my sympathies, and maybe, I don't know, readers' sympathies are engaged more with Constance, because she's the one who it feels as though is in a more difficult situation. You know, she's a servant and things are stacked against her, but of course things are stacked against Isabella as well, and just in a different way.
No, I definitely believed Constance more, I think, when it came to things like that. Yes, yeah. Just something about
all
the way,
very unreliable.
Yes, yeah.
Some very unreliable narrators in that book.
So you mentioned The Forgotten Sister, which is coming out next April 2020.
Yes.
So you said you're moving towards more positive books. Could you, if this is one or if it isn't, is there anything else you can tell us about it at this point?
Yes. Well, it's a dual time book set in the Tudor period and also with a contemporary thread as well. The Tudor story is based on the big historical mystery of who killed Amy Robsart, or did she just fall down the stairs. It's all about the love triangle between Amy and her husband, Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, and of course Queen Elizabeth I. So that's the basis of the historical side of the book, and then the contemporary side it looks at that mystery and tries to solve it, but it's also a sort of an echo of that historical story. So the same events are happening in a different way in the present. Absolutely loved writing it, I have to say. I suppose I do have to warn everybody that, again, we've got a heroine in the contemporary thread who is definitely flawed, but I hope by the end of the book is likeable. And it was a lot of fun because it involves a look at contemporary celebrity culture as well, which I really enjoyed researching. Although I probably have to keep my sources quiet about who my sources were on that. But it's quite a topical book from that perspective as well. So yes, I really, really loved this, and I hope people enjoy it too.
Oh, it sounds very, very good. So House of Shadows, The Phantom Tree, and The Woman in the Lake are out now from Harlequin. I recommend them all. Links are in the description. Put April in your diary for The Forgotten Sister. Nicola, it's been wonderful having you here and having answers for questions that I know I've had for a good while. And hearing all the rest of it has been fantastic. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat about the books. And thanks very much.
Join me on Monday the 11th of November when I will be talking to Orlando Ortega Medina, the author of the psychological thriller The Death of Baseball. The Wormhole Podcast Episode 1 was recorded on the 16th of October and published on the 28th of October 2019. Music and production by Charlie Place.